I need a boyfriend. A millionaire hears his maid say and makes the most unexpected decision. Alexander Harrison, a 37-year-old tech CEO in Boston, never imagined that 5 desperate words from his house manager's lips would completely overturn the lonely world he'd built over the past 5 years. He'd grown accustomed to the silence in his expansive penthouse overlooking the city, to elegant dinners eaten alone, to the price of success, having everything except someone to share it with. But that Tuesday evening, as he walked past the kitchen, he heard Emma Collins' trembling voice on the phone. "I need a fake boyfriend for tomorrow." An absurd sentence, desperate and full of drama. He stood frozen in the darkness, unaware that he'd just witnessed the moment that would turn an unexpected favor into the most beautiful love story neither of them had ever dared to dream of. Stay until the end to discover the miracle that happens when 2 lonely hearts find each other among the autumn leaves of Vermont, under circumstances no one could have anticipated. Emma's voice continued to drift from the pantry, each word like a shard of desperation falling onto the cold marble floor. "Rachel, I know this sounds insane, but Sophie's wedding is this Saturday. Saturday! Just 2 days away." She paused, drawing in a trembling breath. "Mom said, if I don't bring someone home, then I shouldn't come home at all." Alexander stood frozen in the hallway shadows, his heart pounding like a drum. He'd never heard Emma speak with this tone, not the soft, polite voice she always used with him, but the voice of someone drowning and desperate for a final lifeline. "Dad," Emma said, her voice breaking further. "The doctor said this might be his last Thanksgiving. His heart is so weak. And Mom, she keeps saying the only thing she wants before Dad is to see me happy, with someone by my side." A sniffle. Emma was crying. "I already asked Mike. He said it was too weird. I asked Tom. He's traveling for work. 28 years old, Rachel. 28, and I still have to beg people to play a fake boyfriend so my family won't be embarrassed." Alexander felt his chest tighten. 2.5 years. Emma had worked for him for 2.5 years, and he'd never known, never asked, never seen her as a human being with pain, pressures, silent sacrifices. "I know. I have to go. Thanks for listening, Rachel." Emma hung up. A sob burst out, no longer restrained. The kind of crying that comes from deep within the soul, from a place Emma had kept locked away for so long. Alexander wanted to step forward, wanted to say something, but his feet were frozen. Just then, his hand accidentally brushed the glass tumbler on the side table. It fell. The shattering sound exploded in the silent space like a bomb. Emma jerked around with lightning speed. Her eyes were red and swollen, cheeks soaked with tears, mouth open in absolute horror. "Mr. Harrison!" The hallway light cast shadows across Alexander's face, but Emma could still see his eyes clearly, eyes looking at her not as an employee, but as a person he was truly seeing for the first time. That moment stretched like a century. Silence pressed down like lead. Emma hugged herself, her body trembling violently, face burning red with shame and fear. I'm so sorry. You shouldn't have... I didn't know you were home. I'm truly sorry. This will never... Don't." Alexander spoke, his voice rougher than usual. "Don't apologize, Emma." After those words, Emma only nodded quickly, hurriedly wiped her tears, and stumbled toward the back staircase. Alexander stood still, listening to her rushed footsteps disappear into the silence of the large house. He looked down at the shattered glass at his feet, feeling as if they reflected something broken inside himself. 2 hours later, Alexander lay on his king-size bed, staring at the ceiling. Sleep wouldn't come. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Emma's tear-streaked face, heard her trembling voice. 28 years old, and I still have to beg people to play a fake boyfriend. Memories flooded back. Last month, the company's annual party at the Four Seasons. Alexander had walked into the ballroom alone, as always, Tom Ford's suit perfect, practiced smile fixed on his lips. Sarah from marketing had approached. "Still single, Alex? For a successful man like you? What a waste?" He'd laughed, voice confident. "Too busy building an empire, Sarah." Everyone laughed, raised their glasses. But when he got home, when he removed the suit and stood alone in his spacious penthouse, Alexander had poured himself a whiskey and sat by the window overlooking nighttime Boston, feeling painfully hollow. Now, lying in darkness, he suddenly realized a truth so simple it hurt. He and Emma were terrifyingly alike. Emma was lonely because she'd sacrificed everything for family, career, love, personal life, sending money home each month, caring for her parents from afar, forgetting herself entirely. Alexander was lonely because he'd sacrificed everything for success, marriage, friendship, emotions, building Harrison Tech from nothing, forgetting that success can't be held close on late nights. The only difference, Emma had a family who loved her, albeit in a misguided way. And him? He had no one. The clock on his nightstand showed 3 in the morning. Alexander sat bolt upright, heart racing with the craziest thought of his life. 2.5 years. He'd let Emma work in this house for 2.5 years without ever asking if she was okay, how her family was, if she was happy. He'd treated her like a part of the house, necessary, efficient, but soulless. And now, knowing she was suffering, so desperate she had to beg strangers for help, how could he turn away? How could he continue living as if he knew nothing, when the only chance to feel useful, to matter to someone, lay right before his eyes? City lights filtered through the curtains, illuminating Alexander's face. A 37-year-old man about to make the craziest decision, but perhaps also the most right decision of his life. 6:30 in the morning, Emma walked into the kitchen with eyes swollen like ripe peaches. She'd barely slept after last night's scene, her mind replaying the image of Alexander standing in the shadows, his eyes looking at her with something she didn't dare think about: shame, disappointment, or worse, pity. But when she entered the kitchen, Emma froze. Alexander was sitting there, right at the dining table, in front of a coffee cup, still wearing yesterday's suit, tie loosened, hair disheveled, dark circles obvious. He looked like someone who hadn't slept, or rather, like someone who hadn't tried to sleep. "Mr. Harrison," Emma startled, hand unconsciously clutching her shirt hem. You're up so early?" Alexander looked up, their eyes meeting. "Emma, sit down." "I need to prepare breakfast for you." "Sit down." His voice was gentle, but firm in a way that made Emma unable to refuse. She trembled as she pulled out a chair and sat, hands folded neatly on her lap, body tense as a bowstring. Alexander took a deep breath. "We need to talk about last night." Emma's face flushed crimson. "Mr. Harrison, I'm truly sorry. I shouldn't have let personal matters affect my work. I promise this won't—" "Stop!" Alexander interrupted, his voice carrying an emotion Emma had never heard before. "Don't apologize anymore, Emma. I didn't call you down here to blame you." Emma looked at him, bewildered. Then, "I couldn't sleep all night," Alexander said, eyes not leaving hers. "All night I could only think about what you said on the phone, about your sister's wedding, about you needing someone to go with you." Emma's heart raced chaotically. She wanted the earth to open up and swallow her whole. "Emma!" Alexander paused, as if weighing each word. Then he said, clearly and decisively, "If you still need someone to go with you to the wedding this weekend, let me go with you. I'll be your boyfriend, just for that weekend." In that moment, time seemed to stop. Emma stared at Alexander, mouth open, unable to believe her ears. What did you say?" "I'm saying I'll go to Vermont with you. I'll meet your family. I'll play the role of your boyfriend at the wedding," Alexander said, voice strangely calm. "You don't need to ask anyone else." "No." Emma shook her head violently, standing up abruptly. "No, you can't. You can't. You're my boss. This is too complicated. I can't let you do this." "You're not letting me do anything." Alexander also stood. "I'm voluntarily offering." "But why?" Emma asked, voice trembling. "Why would you do this? You have no reason." "I do," Alexander said softly. "I understand the feeling of going alone to important events and having to pretend you don't care. I understand the feeling of being lonely in a crowded room. And I don't want anyone to go through that if I can help." Emma looked at him, tears glistening in her eyes. "This is just pretending. Nothing real." "I know," Alexander nodded. "Just a favor from one lonely person helping another lonely person." That last sentence shattered Emma's final defenses. She collapsed into the chair, covered her face with both hands, and sobbed. "Thank you. Thank you so much." Thursday evening they sat in the living room, at just enough distance between them, not too far but not close either, to rehearse their fake love story. "Where did we meet?" Emma asked, voice still trembling with unease. "Boston Children's Hospital Charity Gala." Alexander answered without hesitation. "Last February, I won a painting at auction. You were there as a volunteer serving champagne. You spilled wine on my suit." Emma's eyes widened. "Spilled wine? Why that detail?" "Because it's memorable." Alexander shrugged, a smile flickering across his lips. "And because it makes sense. I'm not the type who would actively flirt with someone at a charity event." Emma lowered her face, hiding an unexpected smile. That was the first time she'd seen Alexander Harrison had a sense of humor. "We've been dating 8 months, kept it quiet because of work," he continued. "I like Italian food, you like baking, I watch horror films, you watch romantic comedies, just the basics, nothing too complicated." "What if they ask about—" Emma hesitated, cheeks flushing. "About more private things? Like, have we kissed?" Alexander looked at her, eyes unreadable. "We'll improvise, if needed." The air thickened in that moment before Emma quickly nodded and stood up. "That's enough. I'll pack." Friday morning, the graphite-gray Tesla Model S rolled out of the garage at 11 o'clock. Alexander drove, Emma in the passenger seat, small bag at her feet, hands clasped tightly together on her lap. The first hour passed in almost absolute silence, only the smooth engine sound and occasional GPS directions. Emma looked out the window, watching Massachusetts scenery gradually give way to Vermont hills, leaves brilliant yellow and red under autumn sunshine. "Did you grow up in Vermont?" Alexander finally spoke, breaking the wall of silence. "Yes." Emma turned to look at him. "Stowe, a small town. Everyone knows everyone." "Sounds nice." "Sometimes." Emma smiled lightly, but something sad in her voice. "Sometimes suffocating. When everyone knows everything about your life, including things you don't want them to know." Alexander nodded in understanding. A moment later he said, "I was married once." Emma jerked to look at him. He'd never mentioned this before. 5 years ago. Her name was Jessica, a model." Alexander said, voice calm as if reading a financial report. "We married for the wrong reasons. We both wanted success more than we wanted each other. When we realized it, it was too late." "I'm sorry," Emma whispered. "Don't be." Alexander shook his head slightly. "I got what I wanted. It just turned out it wasn't enough." Emma looked at his profile, the hard jawline, eyes fixed straight ahead, but something soft in how he spoke. For the first time, she saw Alexander Harrison not as a millionaire CEO, but just as a lonely man, 3 in the afternoon, the Welcome to Stowe sign appeared. Emma took a deep breath. "We're here." Alexander glanced at her, saw her hand trembling slightly. Without thinking, he reached out, touched her hand lightly. "It'll be okay, I promise." The colonial-style house sat at the end of a gravel driveway, painted white with navy shutters, kitchen smoke drifting from the chimney carrying the scent of baking apple pie. Emma took a deep breath, hand gripping her bag strap until it turned pale. This is it. Before Alexander could turn off the engine, the door flew open. A woman around 56 stepped out, brown-gray hair pulled back, floral apron, eyes identical to Emma's, but sharper, more assessing. Margaret Collins. "Emma!" she called out, but her eyes had already swept past her daughter, landing on Alexander stepping out of the car. Head to toe. From Johnston & Murphy leather shoes, charcoal Armani suit, to the Patek Philippe watch gleaming in the late afternoon light. Margaret said nothing, but her eyes said everything. "This is what I'm talking about." "Mom?" Emma ran to hug her, but Margaret only patted her shoulder hurriedly before approaching Alexander. "So this is the famous boyfriend my daughter's been hiding," she said, voice sweet but thorned. "Alexander Harrison, correct?" "Yes, ma'am." Alexander shook her hand with a polished smile. "Very pleased to meet Emma's mother. She's spoken highly of you." "Only good things, I hope." Margaret smiled, but her eyes still assessed. Inside was warm and alive, family photos on walls, smell of wood and bread, laughter echoing from the kitchen. And right in the living room center, a man in a wheelchair, thin and weak, but eyes brightening when he saw Emma. "Dad!" Emma knelt beside Robert Collins, grasping his frail hand. He smiled, tears rolling down weathered cheeks. "My girl is here," Robert whispered, then looked up at Alexander. "And this is—" "Alexander, sir." Alexander approached, not shaking hands, but gently placing his hand on Robert's shoulder. "Thank you for allowing me to come." Robert grabbed Alexander's hand, squeezing with unexpected strength. "Thank you for taking care of my little girl." Those words stabbed Alexander's conscience. Fake. All of it is fake. "Emma!" A 25-year-old girl rushed in, blonde hair in a ponytail, wearing a floral sundress. "Sophie." Following was a tall, tanned young man with a gentle smile. David Chen. "Oh my God, you hid him this long?" Sophie shrieked, eyes on Alexander like seeing a celebrity. "He's so handsome. Why didn't you tell us?" Emma flushed. "Don't." Dinner was roast chicken, mashed potatoes, homemade bread. Simple, but surprisingly delicious. Alexander, accustomed to 5-star Michelin restaurants, had to admit this family food had something money couldn't buy. "So, Alexander," Margaret spoke, silverware gleaming under chandelier light. "What are your intentions with Emma?" "Mom!" Emma nearly jumped. "To make her happy, ma'am." Alexander answered without hesitation, looking straight into Margaret's eyes. "She deserves that." Emma lowered her face, cheeks burning. Robert spoke, voice weak but full of pride. "Emma has sacrificed so much for this family. Better jobs in New York, bigger opportunities. She stayed in Boston to be closer to home. Sends $2,000 every month. Never complains." Alexander slowly turned to look at Emma. She was biting her lip, eyes glistening. He'd never known, never asked. And now, knowing, something inside him shifted. Not pity, but deep respect. Night came. Emma led Alexander to her old room, lavender walls, bookshelf full of old books, and one double bed. One? They both stood staring at each other, neither speaking. "I'll sleep on the floor," Emma finally said. "No." Alexander shook his head. "I'll sleep on the floor." "You're the guest." "Emma," his voice gentle but firm, "the bed is yours." They finally compromised. Both sleep on the bed with a pillow wall between them. Alexander woke before Emma. Dawn light filtered through lace curtains, painting pale yellow stripes on the old wooden floor. He lay still, not daring to move, listening to Emma's even breathing on the other side of the pillow wall. Last night he'd barely slept, not because the bed was uncomfortable, but because it was too comfortable, too warm, too real. He slowly sat up, walked to the window. Vermont opened before him like a living painting, mountains covered in yellow and red leaves, mist floating, air so fresh he could taste it. In Boston, from his 30th floor penthouse, he only saw concrete and glass. Here, he saw life. Beautiful, isn't it? Emma's voice came from behind, still full of sleep. He turned, saw her sitting up, hair messy, wearing an old cotton nightshirt. No makeup, no styling, just Emma. Completely different from Boston, Alexander said softly. Different in a good way, or bad? He was silent a moment, then smiled. In a better way than I thought. Sees, 2 p.m, Mountain View Inn overflowed with fresh flowers and laughter. Outdoor wedding, wooden chairs arranged in 2 long rows on grass. Simple altar decorated with white carnations and green vines. Behind was the Green Mountains Range, leaves brilliant under October afternoon sun, a backdrop no photographer could create. Emma sat in the front row, hand clutching tissue. Alexander sat beside her, navy suit, silver silk tie. When Sophie emerged in a vintage lace dress, hand holding Roberts on his wheelchair, the entire venue held its breath. David stood at the altar, eyes red-rimmed. Robert handed Sophie to his son-in-law, voice trembling. "Take care of my little girl." "For life, sir," David swore, and then tears flowed, not just from Sophie and David, but from everyone. Emma cried uncontrollably, shoulders shaking. Alexander, without thinking, reached out and took her hand. Emma, startled, looked down at their intertwined hands, then up at him. He gently squeezed tighter. "I'm here." Emma didn't pull away. Instead, she squeezed back, and they sat like that through the rest of the ceremony. Reception was held in an old renovated wooden barn. Fairy lights hung crisscross from ceiling down, creating a glittering fake starry sky. Long wooden tables, wildflower vases, flickering candles. Gentle folk music played from an acoustic band in the corner. Alexander stood beside Emma, champagne glass in hand, looking around. He'd attended dozens of lavish weddings, 5-star ballrooms, Dom Perignon, $200 Ecuadorian roses. But not one wedding, not one, had what this had. Authenticity, he whispered to himself. "What did you say?" Emma asked. "Authenticity," Alexander said, turning to look at her. "Money can't buy this. Authenticity." Emma smiled, and in the warm yellow light, Alexander suddenly thought she was heartbreakingly beautiful. "All couples to the dance floor," Sophie shouted, pulling David to the center. Emma looked at Alexander, panic. "I'm not good at dancing." "Follow me." He extended his hand, warm smile. "I'll lead." They stepped onto the old wooden floor. Elvis Presley's "Can't Help Falling in Love" played, slow and sweet. Alexander placed his hand on Emma's waist. Emma placed her hand on his shoulder. They began to sway, awkward at first, then gradually finding rhythm. Eyes met eyes. The world around them faded. Music, lights, other people. Everything disappeared. Only them left. Only this moment. And Alexander suddenly thought, this doesn't feel like pretending anymore. The song ended. Sophie clapped, speaking in the excited voice of a bride drunk on champagne. "All right, everyone, now we play an old but fun game. When the music stops, couples must kiss. If not, you'll be punished to sing a song." Laughter filled the barn. Emma startled, turning to Alexander with panicked eyes. "We don't need to—" "Just for show," Alexander whispered, but his voice wasn't as certain as before. "To make people believe." Music started again, an upbeat, cheerful song. Couples danced, laughing. Alexander and Emma stood amid the crowd, both feeling the tension in the air between them. And then, suddenly, the music stopped. "Kiss!" everyone shouted, clapping, whistling. Emma looked at Alexander. He looked at her. Time stretched like a century in that brief moment. Then Alexander gently raised his hand, placed it on Emma's cheek, his thumb brushing lightly across her cheekbone. Emma held her breath. He leaned down, slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. She didn't. Lips touched lips. Gentle at first, exploratory, careful. But then something broke, like shattering a dam that had held water back too long. Alexander placed his other hand on Emma's waist, pulling her closer. Emma didn't push away. Instead, her hand gripped his lapel, and she kissed back. Electricity, fire, lightning. Time stopped. The barn disappeared. The cheering faded to distant noise. Only this kiss remained, the taste of champagne and scent of roses and something sweeter, deeper, more dangerous. When they pulled apart, both were breathless. Emma's eyes wide, lips parted, face flushed. Alexander was no better, his heart pounding like it would break through his chest. Everyone clapped, laughed, turned to another couple. But Alexander and Emma just stood there, looking at each other like two people who'd just witnessed something they couldn't explain. 10 at night, the party had quieted down. Emma silently stepped into the garden behind the inn, needing fresh air, needing distance from the noise and lights and the kiss still burning on her lips. Vermont's sky had no light pollution. Millions of stars glittered like diamonds scattered on black velvet. Emma looked up, hugging herself in her thin jacket. "You'll get cold," Alexander's voice came from behind. Emma didn't turn. "I'm fine." He stepped beside her, silent for a moment, both looking up at the sky. Then he spoke, voice rough. That kiss wasn't for show. Emma closed her eyes, feeling her heart ache. Don't say things that will make this harder." "Harder for what?" Alexander turned to look at her. "Going back to normal, forgetting this weekend." Emma said, voice trembling, "You're my boss, Alexander. This is just a favor. 1 weekend, that's all." "What if I don't want it to be just that?" he said, voice filled with unusual determination. "What if when I held your hand during the ceremony, when we danced, when I kissed you, I wasn't pretending at all?" Emma turned, eyes glistening. "Don't." "I haven't been pretending since we got here, Emma." Alexander took another step. "For the first time in 5 years, I feel something real, and the person creating that feeling is you." After that confession, Emma had shaken her head, stepped back. "I need time to think, to—" Then she turned, disappearing into the inn, leaving Alexander standing alone under the starry sky. Sunday, 2 in the afternoon, they got in the car to Boston. The 3.5-hour drive became 3.5 hours of suffocating silence. Emma sat by the window, eyes fixed outside the entire time, not saying a word. Alexander drove, hands gripping the steering wheel until they turned pale, jaw rigid. He wanted to say something, anything, but the air between them was thick as concrete, impenetrable. When the car stopped in front of the penthouse, Emma only said, "Thank you, Mr. Harrison, for everything." Then she got out, took her bag, stepped into the service elevator without looking back once. Alexander sat in the car for another 20 minutes, staring at the steering wheel, feeling like he'd just lost something he never knew he had. The following week was hell. Emma became a ghost in the very house where she worked. Breakfast appeared at 6 sharp, but by 6:10 she'd vanished. Dinner left in the fridge with a brief note. Reheat 3 minutes. Laundry done neatly. Clothes hung in closet. Not a word. Cleaning perfect, but Emma was as if she didn't exist. Alexander went looking for her, in the kitchen, laundry room, her private room downstairs. But each time he approached, she'd already left, as if she knew his every move in advance and was determined to avoid him at all costs. Tuesday night, Alexander couldn't sleep, sat in the dark living room with an untouched glass of whiskey. He heard Emma's footsteps pass through the hallway, held his breath, hoping she would stop, would come back. But the footsteps kept going, then faded completely. Wednesday noon, a knock on the office door. Alexander looked up, heart leaping with foolish hope. "Come in." Emma entered, eyes looking at the floor, hand holding a white envelope. "Mr. Harrison, I need to speak with you." "Emma, this is my resignation." She placed the envelope on the desk, voice cold, professional. 2 weeks' notice, per contract. Alexander felt blood drain from his face. "Emma, don't do this." "This is the right decision," Emma said, still not looking at him. "Good for both of us." "No." Alexander stood abruptly. "Not good. Not good at all. You're running." "I'm doing what's necessary." Emma finally raised her eyes, and Alexander saw the pain in them. "That weekend shouldn't have happened. I shouldn't have let it go too far, and now I need to leave before things get worse." "Worse?" Alexander repeated, voice hoarse. "Emma, how could it be worse than losing you?" Emma closed her eyes, hands clenched. 2 weeks, Mr. Harrison, then I'm gone." She turned, walked out of the room, closing the door with a soft click, like a sentence pronounced. Alexander collapsed into his chair, staring at the white envelope as if it were a bomb about to explode. And in a way, it was. The next 2 weeks were pure mental torture. Emma worked efficiently like a robot. No communication, no eye contact, nothing. Alexander became a prisoner in his own home, counting each remaining day, hour, minute, Friday, the last day, 7 in the morning. Alexander hadn't slept all night. He'd sat in the kitchen since 5:30, a cold cup of coffee before him, eyes fixed on the door. Today was Emma's last day working here. Tomorrow she'd disappear from his life, and he'd return to an empty penthouse, to breakfasts no one prepared, to the silence he'd grown accustomed to but could no longer bear. No, he couldn't let that happen. 6:59. Emma's footsteps echoed from the back stairs. Alexander stood, stepped to block the kitchen entrance. When Emma appeared, she stopped abruptly, eyes wide. "Mr. Harrison, we need to talk," Alexander said, voice more determined than ever. "Really talk. No running this time, Emma." Emma shook her head, stepped back. "There's nothing left to say." "Then listen." Alexander moved toward her, eyes unwavering. "If you don't want to talk, then at least hear me. Just once. I'm begging you." Emma stood still, hands clenched, but she didn't run. That was all Alexander needed. "These 2 weeks have been hell," he began, voice trembling slightly. "Not because the coffee wasn't right or clothes weren't ironed well, but because I see you every day and can't talk to you. I miss you, Emma. I miss you when you're standing right in front of me." Emma bit her lip, tears beginning to well up. 5 years ago, I built a wall around my heart. Alexander continued. I told myself success was enough, that I didn't need anyone, that emotions only made me weak. And I believed it, until that Tuesday night when I heard you crying in the kitchen. He took another step. "Vermont changed me, Emma, or rather, you changed me. For the first time in 5 years, I felt something real. I found myself smiling not out of politeness. I held someone's hand and didn't want to let go. I kissed someone and felt the world stop spinning." "Don't," Emma whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Don't say more." "Why?" Alexander asked, voice almost pleading. "Why are you afraid to hear the truth?" "Because I felt it too," Emma burst out, voice breaking. Because I started loving you long before Vermont. Every morning making your coffee, every evening leaving dinner, hoping you'd eat. Every time you said, "Thank you," in that soft voice you only use with me. She wiped tears, but they kept flowing. That kiss didn't start anything, Alexander. It only exposed what was already there. Alexander hesitated no more. He stepped forward, cupped Emma's face with both hands, looked straight into her eyes. Then don't go, because you already have my heart, Emma. You've had it for a long time. And he kissed her, not to pretend, not for show, only because he needed to, because he loved her, because if he didn't kiss her right now, he would die. Emma kissed back, desperately, passionately, completely. Her arms wrapped around his neck, pulling him closer, as if afraid he'd disappear. When they pulled apart, both breathless, forehead against forehead. "So?" Emma whispered, smiling through tears. "I don't have to move out?" Alexander laughed, his first real laugh in 2 weeks. "You're not going anywhere, except moving into the master bedroom, with me." April. Vermont welcomed them again, but this time not with autumn leaves, but with blooming spring flowers. Alexander drove the familiar road to Stowe, right hand resting on Emma's thigh, a gesture so natural it felt like he'd been doing it forever. The colonial house was still there, but this time something was different. Robert Collins stood at the door, no more wheelchair, hand holding a cane, smile radiant. The heart surgery Alexander had quietly funded had created a miracle. "Son." Robert hugged Alexander tight, voice choked. "No more you or young man." "Son." Margaret stood behind, arms crossed, smiling meaningfully. When Emma asked, "Why are you smiling like that?" she only said, "I knew from the beginning, the way he looked at you when you weren't watching, like you hung the entire sky up there." Boston in April was also different. The penthouse was no longer a lonely fortress. Their photos on walls, Vermont, Cape Cod beaches, Christmas with the Collins family, Emma's books crowding the shelves, green plants on the balcony, laughter, life. Emma now worked for a nonprofit education organization for children, work she loved that Alexander had helped her find. No longer a house manager, an equal partner. That evening they cooked together, Emma chopping vegetables, Alexander sautéing meat, soft jazz playing from speakers. Alexander stepped behind her, wrapped arms around her waist, chin resting on her shoulder. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" Emma turned her head, smiling. "For that desperate call, for letting me play fake boyfriend, for making me feel alive again." Emma turned, kissed him gently. "It stopped being fake the moment you said yes, Alexander, from the very first moment." And in the penthouse, once empty, now overflowing with love, they held each other in the Boston sunset, knowing that sometimes the most beautiful love stories begin with a lie that becomes the truest truth they've ever known.